All right, let's continue on with the anatomy here. So if we go back to this picture here, we can see the renal artery right there. This is a blood vessel that supplies blood to the kidneys. It's about 25% of our cardiac output goes through our renal arteries. If you have my notes, it lists all these different blood vessels. I'm not worried about that. Next is the renal vein. Here's the renal vein. This is a blood vessel that carries blood away from the kidneys. All right, so let's get to the main part of the kidney, and this is known as a nephron. So the nephron is a structural and functional unit of the kidney. So this is showing a nephron here. Here's another nephron. We have about 1 million nephrons per kidney. So let's take a look at this part in higher magnification, that part of the kidney. All right, so this is that part that we're talking about, and this is known as the renal corpuscle. All right, there are two parts of the renal corpuscle. One is the glomerulus, shown here. All right, and so this is a capillary tuft within the renal corpuscle, and this is where blood filtration is going to occur. All right, so this is where we're going to filter our blood. All right, now if we go to the next picture here, this is showing a much higher magnification of the glomerulus. If we go to the even next picture, this is a high magnification of these glomerular capillaries. All right, and so what we see on those capillaries is they have a bunch of little holes called fenestrations. Fenestra is also the same thing. All right, so here the walls of the glomerulus are fenestrated, so they have many pores in them, and this allows more substances to be pushed through that membrane. All right, so next is glomerular capsule. So that's all the stuff outside of the glomerulus. Now, so the glomerular capsule is also known as a Bowman's capsule. So there's a thin-walled sac that surrounds the glomerulus, and it's going to capture the filtrate. So we get high hydrostatic pressure. It's going to force water, small dissolved substances through these membranes. That Bowman's capsule is going to capture that filtrate. Two layers to this. One is the parietal layer, which is what we see out here. That is the parietal layer there. All right, so that's going to capture the filtrate. The other is the visceral layer, which is on the glomerulus itself. So if we go to this picture here, this is a glomerular capsule. Around that, you're seeing kind of this kind of odd structure there. That's part of the Bowman's capsule. And so that's a visceral layer. And that visceral layer, these are called podocytes. All right, so those are the cells. So those are the cells of the visceral layer, are these podocytes. Now there are little spaces between the cells, and those openings there, that's where the filtrate moves through. All right, so now one of the problems with a filtration process is that a filtration process is just size selective. So if you're small enough to move through there, you can move through. Now the thing is, we don't want everything that moves through the glomerulus that gets into the Bowman's capsule to eventually become urine, because that would, be quite a bit. All right. So we have this tubule here and blood vessels around that tubule, in which we're going to get a lot of those substances to come back into our blood before we get over here to the collecting duct. And by the time we get to the collecting duct, that's when we're going to have urine. Okay, so this next tube, so here's the renal corpuscle. Behind that is the renal tubule. So this is a small tube that transports the filtrate from the renal corpuscle to the collecting ducts. So renal corpuscle to the collecting duct there. All right, now there are three parts to this. One is the proximal convoluted tubule, which is located here. Next is the loop of Henle, also known as the nephron loop. That loop of Henle has a descending limb here, and then it has an ascending limb, which will be important later on. All right, and then we have the distal convoluted tubule. So proximal, close to the point of attachment, which is the renal corpuscle. Distal, farther from the point of attachment. All right, and they're convoluted, they're not straight. All right, next are the collecting ducts. So this is a collecting duct, so many nephrons are going to put urine into that collecting duct. So these are small tubes that are going to transport urine from the nephron to the calyces. All right, so over here, these are calyces once again. All right, so let's take a look at some blood vessels that are important here. One is the afferent arteriole. So shown right here is the afferent arteriole. So this is going to supply blood to the glomerulus. Next is the efferent arteriole, so this one that we see here. So the efferent arteriole carries blood away from the glomerulus. All right, so when we go back and looking at a previous picture here, here's the afferent arteriole, here's the efferent arteriole. And what I want you to notice here is that the efferent arteriole has a larger diameter than the afferent arteriole. Okay, so the afferent arteriole has a larger diameter than the efferent arteriole. All right, and so more blood goes into the glomerulus that can leave the glomerulus. So this is going to increase the hydrostatic pressure within the glomerulus. All right, next, if we come back to this picture here, next are the peritubular capillaries. So these are the peritubular capillaries here. All right, so these are vessels that surround the proximal convoluted tubule and the distal convoluted tubule. Next are the vasa recta. These are the vasa recta down here. So these are vessels that surround the loop of Henle. Now, another structure associated with this, if we go back to this picture here, we're seeing these cells right here. And you can see on the side here, this is known as the Juxtaglomerular Apparatus. So this is a structure that's going to help control the rate of filtrate formation and also systemic blood pressure. So it's a mass of cells between the afferent arteriole and the distal convoluted tubule. So two parts of this. We have the juxtaglomerular cells, all right, and these are going to sense blood pressure in the afferent arteriole, and they're going to secrete renin, which, as I mentioned earlier with renin, is going to increase blood pressure overall. Next are the macula densa. These are the macula densa cells there, all right. So these are going to respond to changes in the solid content of the filtrate. We'll talk about this later.